Currently in American political discourse, there's a debate over voter ID. Democrats say Republicans are trying to suppress the vote and that requiring an ID to vote is racist because they believe that minorities don't know how to go to the DMV, which is just ridiculous. At the same time, in New York City, they're mandating IDs for entering buildings. And yet Democrats are all on board with this. All of the spineless, pathetic establishment authoritarian weasels who like to respond to me on Twitter all of a sudden have gone silent now that New York City is banning the disabled from the workplace. Oh, I know. I'm not playing these games about semantics and what they really want to do. Shut your mouths. This is an authoritarian takeover. I'm sick of the excuses. The people who say, Tim, the camps that they're building in Australia, it's just because the quarantine hotels aren't working. Oh, I get it. So if you want to build an internment camp, first intern people in hotels, complain the hotels don't work enough, and then everyone goes, hey, I got an idea, intern them in a camp. So they're doing in Australia, what do they call it? Alternative quarantine hub with relocatable cabins. Excellent choice of language. We had a couple people on Timcast IRL tell me that, oh, it's no big deal. It's just because the hotels weren't working. So we'll intern people somewhere else. In New York City, you are now allowed, nay, required to fire any of your staff that have a disability, preventing them from getting the vaccine. Sorry. And if you followed my reporting yesterday and Timcast IRL last night, you'll have known that I called. I think I called maybe like 25 different restaurants just to get the general feel for what they're doing. And they all said you must have proof of vaccination. And all but one said that you will not have any exemptions. So in this instance, I asked them, my friend has multiple sclerosis. They are unable to get the vaccine. The doctor said no. And they said, that's too bad. If you don't have proof of vaccine, you can't come in. One restaurant I called said, if they have MS, then that's fine. We'll let them come in, which is interesting. And I was like, are you sure? I mean, I don't think, no, we'll allow that. I think some people are still saying no to this. But my friends, in this segment, I would like to do something for you. I would like to violate Godwin's law to the most extreme way I can, which is to compare Bill de Blasio to Hitler and the Nazis, because I think now is appropriate. I remember Godwin himself, he tweeted something saying, go ahead and do it. Compare Trump to the Nazis. And all the leftists were like, oh, punch a Nazi. And now they're all like, oh, show us your papers. What did Trump do? Trump didn't lock down cities. Trump didn't go invade other countries. No, these people are the fascists. They are the authoritarians. They are the Nazis. They're not identical. And that's the problem. They say, well, the Nazis wanted X, Y, and Z, and these people only want X and Y. I don't care. They're authoritarian cultists, and they're psychotic. And what's happening in New York City should send shivers down your spine. I called 24 restaurants and they all said, we will demand your papers and we will deny you access if your disability prevents falling in line. Well, some people are refusing. Some people are saying no. The Daily Mail says backlash erupts as rollout of vaccine passport checks get underway at New York City restaurants, with some business owners branding the move segregation. It is worse than segregation. They're already talking about boosters. This is not about COVID. This is about extreme authoritarian power and these psychotic individuals and the morons and the midwits who are propping up everything we were told not to let happen. And that's New York City. Now, I know people in New York. I know there are friends of the Timcast IRL show, been on numerous times, who live there and provide and still fund and service and support these systems. It's absolutely incredible to me that we're literally at a point where the businesses are saying, papers, please. And when you say, I'm sorry, I'm disabled and unable to get the paper, they say, too bad, get out. Some of them, it was funny when they were so desperately saying, we have outdoor seating. And so if I got fed up and I asked one restaurant, I was like, so you're saying people with MS aren't allowed in your restaurant? And they said, well, no, it's not that. You have to have the proof of the vaccine. Yeah, well, you can't get it. And they said, I'm sorry, we're just following orders. Scumbags, scum. You know what we need? We need a phone bank. This is what we need. We need public support and public pressure. The left organizes these things all the time, spamming phone calls. If you live in New York, or you know someone who does, or you have visited one of these restaurants, why don't you call the restaurants and ask them, are you mandating vaccines? Are you going to deny people with medical issues entrance into your facility? What about people? What if it's raining? You can sit outside. I am not going to make someone in a wheelchair sit outside because you are following a decree from a despot, fascistic de Blasio. I want to read something for you. This is an article from September 13th, 2017. The Nazis' first victims were the disabled. Do you know these things? Do you know how history played out? Do you know the warnings? Do you recall what they told us not to let happen? It's unfortunate, isn't it? So the older generation passes on. The lessons are lost. They say wealth lasts 3 generations. Makes sense, doesn't it? It's almost like the fourth turning. And I guess that's it. The wealth lasts 3 generations, whether it's the individual family or it's just the greater of society. Somebody works hard. They work their hands to the bone and they succeed and they produce wealth. And then they have children. And the children grow up in a luxury and not understanding the hardships of having to survive the depression and the chaos and the war. And but they still learn some lessons from their parents. They take some of that inheritance. They get well-connected jobs, and they're okay. Midwits, probably. And their kids have no lessons. Their kids don't know anything. And they squander the money, and then eventually it evaporates. And their kids are broke. And that's kind of like the fourth turning. It's kind of like where we're going now. I'm not a scholar of World War II or the Spanish Civil War or anything. I've only read some things, but I can tell you a few things. By all means, people are allowed to tell me I'm wrong. They went after the disabled. We know that. They were eugenicists. They wanted to purge the undesirables. Well, let's think about a few things. If you right now were a fascist like Bill de Blasio, a psychotic despot, and you wanted to purge minorities from society and the disabled, what would you do? I don't know. How about this? You have the data in front of you saying the black community are the least likely to be vaccinated. You mandate vaccine passports and IDs. When their own ideology says it's racist to require IDs, they do it anyway. I don't think it's racist to require IDs, mind you. But I do think there is a serious problem with mandating medical procedures when your doctor might not allow you to undergo it. Which brings me to the disabled. If you were a psychopath who hated disabled people and didn't want them working, what would you do? You pass a vaccine mandate. Now, just because someone is generally disabled doesn't mean that they can't get the vaccine. But there are many, many disabilities preventing people from being able to get vaccinated. If you have a history of seizures, anaphylaxis, multiple sclerosis, cancer, and then there's the personal decisions about maybe a woman wants to get pregnant and she doesn't want to be taking a vaccine just before doing so. Or even though the CDC says they can, their doctor says, I'd recommend against it. Maybe because of a family history, or maybe it's because someone in their family had cancer. This is what these psychotic people who are propping this up don't get. These establishment Democrat activists who tweet all this stupid BS at me. What if your mother died of cancer and your doctor says, because of this, we are being very careful because you are high risk, but you're not you don't have a medical condition yourself. Your doctor might say that. So that's why I always say, I have no problem with the vaccines. I think they're fantastic. I think, hey, look, the cases went down. That's great news. They're saying you need booster shots. Well, okay, that's up to you. The company wants to provide a service. You choose. You go to your doctor and you get advice. That's not what's happening in New York. That's not what's happening in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New Orleans. What's happening there is they're basically excising portions of the population. A massive transfer of wealth, a great reset, and an authoritarian rigidity emerging in these cities and these states. I want to read something for you from the New York Times. This is from Kenny Fries. I sit facing the young German neurologist across the small table in a theater in Hamburg, Germany. I'm here giving one-on-one talks called The Unenhanced. What has happened to those deemed unfit about research on Action T4, the Nazi euthanasia program to exterminate the disabled. I'm afraid of what you're going to tell me, the neurologist says. I'm not surprised. I've heard similar things before, but this time is different. The young man sitting across from me is a doctor. Action T4 could not have happened without the willing participation of German doctors. I have a personal stake in making sure this history is remembered. In 1960, I was born missing bones in both legs. At the time, some thought I should not be allowed to live. Thankfully, my parents were not among them. I first discovered that people with disabilities were sterilized and killed by the Nazis when I was a teenager, watching the TV miniseries Holocaust in 1978. But it would be years before I understood the connection between the killing of the disabled and the killing of the Jews and other undesirables, he says, quote, all of whom were in one way or another deemed unfit. Listen, here's what you need to understand. As immediately the left will come out and say, barring people without a vaccine is not executions. Did you think that overnight the politicians in Germany came out and said, oh, we're going to execute disabled people? Of course they didn't. They needed excuses. They claimed that the Jewish people had typhus and needed to be segregated, and we needed to know who they were because they were sick. They said the disabled, they're unfit and unwell and they're hurting society. We need to know who they are because they're unfit. They are psychotic. And that's why the U.S. said, we will crush you. And that's why we stormed the beaches of Normandy on D-Day to stop this evil. And now it's here at our doorstep. And it is being propped up by mostly Democrats. I mean, let's be real. It's not Republicans, for the most part, cheering for this. Sure, neocons, people like Bill Kristol, I guess. I don't know if he's cheering for it or not, but he's just aligned with the establishment. These people are insane. And the restaurants in New York are insane. One of the restaurants the other day said, I'm sorry, I can't risk it. I'm pretty sure that's what the German people said. When you ask, how did it get so bad? Oh, I just can't risk it. Yeah. There's a video going viral. It shows 12-year-old girls being detained by cops. Apparently, one 12-year-old is being arrested for not wearing a mask in Australia. And she resists. And the police pepper spray her, a 12-year-old, and the girls are screaming and crying. And I look at this video, and I'm reminded of each and every person who said to me, Tim, you don't understand. We can't stand up for our rights because we have kids. And if we do, we'll lose our jobs and we won't be able to feed them. I get it. I understand. I don't have kids. So I don't know that feeling. But I can tell you this. It will be your children being pepper sprayed and beaten by police. And then you'll think to yourself, if only I stood up and spoke out before it got to this point. And that's the problem. It's too easy, isn't it? It's too easy to sit back and take the easy path and say, I will do nothing. I will say nothing. I will not speak up because it doesn't affect me. And right now, I still have a job. Yeah, that's what people were saying in Germany. At a certain point, they decided to start fleeing the country. I can't go to New York. I can't. In good conscience. I have friends who can't go to New York. Obviously, if you saw this segment the other day, you know that Lydia on Timcast IRL has MS. Her doctor will not allow her to get the vaccine. It's one of the reasons I'm so pissed off about this. It affects me personally. I can see it happening. I can see how it affects people. And I think it's authoritarian. I think it's psychotic. And I can say it 50 billion times, psychotic. And that means if we wanted to do a show in the New York area, we can't in the New York area. Now, there's an exemption. If you're a performer, you're allowed in. Isn't that amazing? How does that make sense? We're trying to stop the pandemic, but if you travel from out of state to play music or perform anyway, you're exempt. It's because you are living under a boot. And it's because you refuse to speak up. Because you said, I will not risk my life for anyone but me. And I would rather my children live under a boot being beaten mercilessly by these authoritarian wingnuts than to actually stand up now while we have the ability to say no to this. When the future comes and you're old and you see your child strapped to a chair being tortured by cops like they do in China, they do it. You see the video where the guy posted, he was posting online that he was sick of the police. So they detained him, chained him, and started torturing him. And he was crying, begging, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. What are you going to say when that's your kid? They'll tell you that it won't come to that point. Maybe that's true, but it can happen here. Did you think that we would be at this point with New York City? Did you think, what do you think would have happened if 3 years ago I said, in 3 years, New York City will mandate IDs to enter almost every building except for residential buildings? That they will require you to undergo an injection in order to get access. Sure, I can put it that way and they'll say, whoa, I could say vaccination. People might be like, oh, that's a little different. Same thing. It's framing, though. Okay. If I told you that New York would say you can't come in without ID, would you believe it? The Democrats would be like, BS. Requiring IDs is racist. They have no ideology. They have a lust for power, and it's being handed to them. Here's what's frustrating to me. I was talking to some people about cancel culture and what's the word I'm thinking of? Anathematization of individuals. Basically, I don't know if cancel culture is the right word. It's almost like people are being excised from modern society. In a lot of ways, that's really, really bad for the establishment because it creates parallel economies. But it's something I considered a long time ago. Look, I worked for Vice. I got employed by Fusion. These are mainstream corporate press. And when I left Fusion, I had every opportunity. I had all of these leftist blogs saying like, what do you want to do? We know who you are. We're familiar with your work. We think you're smart. Let's see it. What do you got? And I said, I'm not going to go that route. And I'll tell you, it was because I went to Vox.com. And when I saw some of the people they had in that office, and I knew the kind of lies they published in propaganda, I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to walk into a situation for any amount of money. I'd rather just live in the woods. And then I thought about something. The more and more I grow this company, the more and more I do this work, there's two things to consider. The further I walk this path, the further away I get from all of the mainstream industry and establishment wealth. And I absolutely could choose to just go bask in all of that. I mean, it was how many years ago now? It's almost 5 years ago. It was over just about 5 years ago that I could have walked away from the Disney Corporation and gone to any one of these networks and been paid substantial amounts of money. And I look at the very little amount of work it was required for these people to work at these companies. They barely do anything. I'd be paid really, really well. I'd be secure and protected. I'd have nothing to worry about, would I? That's not me. And it's dishonest. And I said no to that. And so I said, I am going to stand up and speak out because a job at these companies is not worth the hell that is being wrought by these lunatics. And now that means that I know I will never be able to work for any of those companies. The more I paved my own path, the more it became obvious that I would have to continue to do so if I was going to have any kind of success. It will not be through them. Because each and every one of us on YouTube, I mean, those who have these channels, we're not going to be getting jobs anywhere else. What if they ban Steven Crowder? What if they ban his payment processor? I think we're dangerously close to all of that happening. It's gonna happen soon, maybe by next year. Midterms are coming. Do you think they want to allow Republicans to win back control, even if they are just a roadblock? Of course not. So every day I make these videos, every move I make, launching this website, I think about the risks. What happens when you become more than a thorn in the side of the establishment elites? What happens when they decide that you are as on par of a threat with Julian Assange? Not saying that I am. And then you get locked up for a decade. Is it worth it? I have to consider that. Sure, I don't have kids. And you know what? It is. I'm not going to sit back and let these insane people implement this stuff and torture people. And you can see them doing it. You can see how bad things have gotten. Food shortages are getting even worse. I tweeted about it. You've got gas prices skyrocketing. You've got camps being built in Australia. People are saying they're doing it in the United States. I'll look into that one. And people say, yeah, well, I have kids, so I refuse. Okay. Why should I do any of this? Right? That's the challenge. The challenge is every day looking at every comment where they say, I will never stand up. But you should, Tim. Appreciate your work. I get it. I've always understood this. I don't think I'm special at all. In fact, maybe it's a bit reckless. Maybe I'm the dumb one. I always thought about this. I remember I had a friend who worked as a waitress. This was in Chicago, complaining about only getting $2 an hour and requiring tips. And they were saying if you can't afford a tip, you shouldn't go out to eat. And I said, so I can't go to the restaurant because I can't give you extra money? And they were like, we don't get paid. We get $2 an hour. And I was like, you chose that job. Don't get mad at me. You know, you come to me and put out your hand, you might get nothing. I'll tell you this. If you and every one of your coworkers walked out, the restaurant would say, what do you want? You do it in the middle of the day and take advantage of them. And you'll say, we want $5 more an hour, guaranteed. And they will say, fine. Now, to be fair, the servers have a minimum wage guarantee, meaning you get $2 an hour plus tips. If your tips don't make up to $7.75 an hour at the time, it's like 12 or something now, then the company would have to pay you at least minimum wage. But they were complaining because they didn't want to make minimum wage. They wanted to make more. Okay, well, you can't rely on me for that extra money. Sorry. But how about you collectively bargain? And they say no, and they won't do it. So I've known this. I've absolutely known this. And that's why I've long said I hate voting against someone. For the most part, I won't do it. I recognize strategic retreats. I recognize sometimes you have to say, okay, fine, I'll accept that, it's really, really bad. But I'll tell you, I'm looking at the Libertarian Party, like the Mises Caucus, maybe, because my attitude is I don't care. You keep wasting your vote. You keep voting for trash. I won't. I'm not going to do that. I'll vote for the person that I think represents me the best or represents what is right the best. And that means I understand something else. Throughout my life, seeing people refuse to stand up and speak out and just watching things get worse and then jumping ship, I'm supposed to be optimistic that people are going to stand up and push back and finally speak out. Some people will. And we're seeing it with these schools. More and more parents are now protesting. All right, that's good. But it's amazing to me that nobody wants to actually take any risks. And maybe it's not amazing. I mean, I know. I remember when I was like 19, there were these guys, they had a small little warehouse space with a mini ramp in it for skateboarding. And they told me that they each spend $100 a month for a key and they can go and skate whenever they want. And I said, that is brilliant. If I can get 10 of my friends to all pitch in $100 a month right now, we can have our own winter skate spot because you can't skate in winter. And do you know what each and every one of these people said to me? That sounds awesome, Tim. Once you build it, let me know and I'll consider it. And I said, no, this takes you stepping forward, taking the risk with the $100 so that we can go and do this. And they all said, nah. Wow. They want you to do the work, then they want to latch on. So this is what I see happening for a lot of people. Now, obviously, look, those of you who are watching this, you're more likely to be paying attention and pissed off, and that's probably why you're watching it. But there's just too many people who say, nah, no, sorry. I'm not going to speak up. I don't want to risk my job. What would I do? Where would I go? I don't know. Well, think about all the people in New York. Where are they going to go? What happens when these mandates come to your state? And they will. What happens when they come to your city? What happens when it gets worse? What happens when it's the booster shot? Hey, that CDC card's got 4 lines. It's not just one booster shot. What happens when they say, okay, now we're doing the next vaccine. You got to get that one too. What happens when they then say you have to download the app or else? What happens when they then say, if you don't, we'll take your money from you? It's happened to other people. Bank accounts being frozen, money being taken, accounts being deleted. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Now is the time where we can just speak. We can be non-compliant peacefully and protest the way we're allowed to. Within the system, legally. It's the smart move. Peaceful mass non-compliance. Protest. Civil disobedience. I think these are good things. So these restaurants in New York, I want to remind all of you, what Bill de Blasio signed in executive order is not a law. In fact, there is a law saying you cannot discriminate on the basis of disability. So would you choose to violate the law because the mayor said so? Do you think that when it comes time for you to be sued, the judge, you'll be able to tell the judge, I was just following orders? Wise up. For everybody else, maybe we need a phone bank campaign to start reminding these people what they're doing and tell them they're Nazis. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.